Hello, all you lovely computer people, and this is a special episode. And no, we're not focusing on the lettuce. We're focusing on something much more interesting today. The camera is tripod free, so don't mind the jiggle vision. And today we are talking about this. Do. What is that? Or that? Or these? Or those? Look, they're coming up everywhere. Oh, look at all of that. Now, you eagle eyed folks out there will know exactly what the heck these are. But for those of you who don't know or go, let me just point out you spend a lot of money on these at the supermarket, and I get them for free. Lol. No, I'm joking, of course. But seriously, these are the Pleurotus species from the family Pleurotiaceae. Now, what does that mean? Well, they're oyster mushrooms. Yes, they don't look like at the store. Now, do they? Because usually the ones at the store are yellow or gray. Those are usually pearl or golden oysters, and these are neither of those. These, more likely than not, are blue oysters. Not very blue, are they? How about that? Well, that's a side effect of them being cultivated out in the open air in my vegetable bed. Look at those fall crops. And then I have mushrooms. But anyway, yeah, how about that? Don't mind this unfortunate specimen. Cabbage moths are a thing. But anyway, so let's start with the details. The name Pleurotus means side ear in Latin, basically. And ostreatus, which is the one commonly used for the pearl oysters, just means oyster. Go figure. However, blue oysters are a subspecies, and I'm not entirely certain on the Latin. I couldn't find a clear answer to it. I'm sure one of y'all will stick that in the comments section. But anyway, these are super blues, if I recall correctly, or standard blues. It doesn't matter. They're delicious. I can tell you that much. I mean, I have already had a few and cooked them up with stuff, and they're amazing. But anyway, they are native to most of the world, except for the North Pole and Antarctica, I think. You can find them in forests, usually when the temperature is right and the humidity is right. And our sponsor is Polka over there. What do you think of this episode, Polka? Polka! She's being camera shy now, of course. One of the farm cats. But anyway, as I said, they appear in USDA zones 2 through 10. They prefer 60 degrees Fahrenheit on average and 80 to 90% humidity, which we have right now. This episode's being filmed in October during hurricane season. Hurricane Helene just missed our portion of Carolina and beat up the western portion of Carolina, and I hope that that's resolved reasonably quickly. Those people really got it bad. But anyway, the soil pH substrate that they prefer has to be about 6.7 to 6.93, which this soil most certainly is because it's acidic, and that's normal here. I'm actually trying to sweeten the soil a little bit, but that's a slow process. The exposure is full sun to partial. Now, typically in a growing situation, they're going to use less light to get the color they prefer. The neighbor children are exploding. Anyway, but in full normal weather conditions, you get them looking like this. And I mean, say what you will, they don't have to be perfectly blue, but normally blue oyster mushrooms are a sort of slate gray blue color, not true blue, which is okay. Now, the maximum size for these things for a cap will usually be anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to almost a full foot. And you can see that there is, again, color difference just a few feet apart. That's just how the mushrooms do. In fact, let's go over here for a minute. Don't mind my weeds. See that? And that, and Blasco has come out for an episode. Hey, Blasco! Anyway, as I was saying, these are also known as hiratake in Japanese. And there are many types of oyster mushrooms. These blue oysters are just one of many. There are king oysters, golden oysters, pearl oysters, black pearl oysters, pink oysters. In fact, I would not be surprised if there wasn't a red oyster or something out there, and they come in different shapes, and you can find them out in the woods. Though the yellow or golden oysters are somewhat invasive in North America, and realistically, folks, if you get a grow kit with those, dispose of it properly. You don't want them getting loose because they will outcompete native species and cause problems, which I will get into some of that in a moment. So, as you can see, they're coming out here. Now, what caused this? Well, see this soil? That is a layer of mushroom compost on top of the soil in this garden bed. This is part of an experiment to use a live mushroom compost, unsterilized, sourced from a lovely mushroom farm in town. And yes, this is an advertisement of sorts. Sandhills Mushroom Farm. They're right here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. They're local. They grow their own. By the way, just want to point out, you really want to patronize your local mushroom growers because 80% of the world mushroom growing comes from China. And we really don't need to send our bucks over there. But, mild political rant over. Anyway, so I laid down the mushroom compost in the warm season before I planted tomatoes, and then I re-upped it with an extra thick layer. And so here we are. Now, October is the best time to find oyster mushrooms in the wild. And it is October, and these are coming up in droves. Now, the interesting thing is, much like the plants around them, I have to water them. Didn't think that was going to be necessary, but basically I have to break out the hose every 2 days and water them as though they are plants to get this kind of growth in. This kind of growth and this level of quality. I'm not selling them. I'm now growing them for me because I was not expecting them. But that's basically it. I have to fertilize the plants, and I have no idea if the liquid fertilizer affects them or not. I'm assuming it does because mushrooms, like plants, take up nutrients. But they also help break down organic compounds. So the organic compounds that came in with the spent mushroom blocks, the mushroom compost, they're taking that up and they're dissolving it and turning it into more dirt. This soil was pretty depleted when I started this trial back in spring. And now it's looking pretty good. I mean, look at that. These light brown bands are residuals from the mushroom compost. So, yeah. Now, an interesting story about oysters and bioremediation. Because oysters are actually really good for taking bad stuff out of the soil so that you can then harvest the oysters, and then take it away and dispose of it. In Costco, Busan, there was an oil spill in 2007. They remediated it partly by using 1,000 mats of human hair that was sourced from local salons. They wove that hair into mats and then inoculated with oysters. And the oysters basically pulled the oil out of the soil and substrate and wherever they were applied, which is interesting. Then they disposed of that and cleaned up the environment. So mushrooms aren't just a food source. They aren't just a decomposer. They could be the big solution to a lot of our industrial problems. We just have to look at it very carefully. As you can see in my case, the whole point of the mushrooms was to basically resurrect a garden bed that had become has some soil problems, soil structure problems, nutrient problems, and an overabundance of zinc, which is slowly declining thanks to mycelium. In fact, let me show you something here. See this guy? This mushroom's no longer good for eating because it's been chewed on by all kinds of critters. As you can see, it's not pretty. But a good identification feature for oysters is that these gills, go all the way down to the stem, but not all the way down the stem. That's a good ID feature. But as always, I'm going to recommend that if you're going to eat any mushrooms in the wild, you better make absolutely certain you know what they are. Because there are a lot of bad AI-built mushroom guidebooks on the internet, but also there are a lot of poisonous lookalikes, and oysters have a few of them. And they're not just on one continent. In this case, I know they're safe because I know that these mushrooms couldn't have gotten here by any other means. However, I also know that there are other mushrooms in this vicinity. So let's start. I just want to show you this real quick before I cap off this video. Like that guy. Or this huge guy. Neither of those are edible. There's some kind of earth, I believe it's called a earth ball, or one of the puffball mushrooms. I can't remember which, but they're not edible. Knowing what you can safely eat is very important when you're harvesting mushrooms. And knowing what should be, where it is also important. Oysters are packed with vitamin D and are actually possibly one of the world's best meat substitutes if you're going vegan or vegetarian. So I highly recommend them. Even if you're not, I highly recommend them because they are adaptable in a lot of recipes that otherwise wouldn't have had them. So, with all that said, if you have any comments on oyster mushrooms or any thoughts, please put them in the comments section. And as always, folks, keep them growing. If you like this episode, hit like. If you haven't, hit subscribe. Stay tuned for more episodes. And we're going to be back to our normal plant-based content in a moment. Thanks for watching.